in this instance, we know from a New York Times story that the impetus for the bombing came from Fox News. He was watching Fox News, and Sean Hannity and some of the other cheerleaders were saying, go bomb the crap out of them.
Yeah.
And that motivated him to move ahead, despite the fact that many on the right, including some of his strongest supporters, were opposed to this. But at the same time, when he got other mainstream sources, from the Times to CNN, basically repeating what we knew from the intelligence community reports, he went off on this rant and called them all scum. So, this is the reality under Donald Trump, but we know that it's not just what he says, because you can be sure that on Fox News and on the other communications networks that they have built out, that are the main, if not the only sources of information for so many of his followers, they're just going to be repeating what he said and not saying, well, maybe it isn't quite what he said.
Well, the thing that I had a mini epiphany during the campaign, the last campaign, and I don't know if
At
we've
your
talked
age,
about.
watch out. Epiphanies can be
Yeah.
dangerous.
And I was talking. I went to I went to a couple of his rallies. At one rally, I had a film crew with me, um, and we made a small video about people who are attending his rallies, diehard fans. And I asked them again and again, things about that were in the news, the fact that former aides of his had called him fascist,
Yeah.
and what did they think about that, or statements he had made, cats and dogs not being true. And I discovered something. His diehard fans, I'm not talking about, the 10, 20% of his support are Republicans automatic or people worried about the price of eggs, but his diehard fans see Donald Trump as their source of media. They don't, they didn't know about the fascist remarks, or the few who did said that had to be orchestrated by the media against him. They didn't care what anybody else said. And the way that you and I might listen, say to NPR, and the reporter says today, the stock market did this, or someone said that, or a foreign minister overseas signed this thing. We basically accept that as true. We may disagree with how it's being context, or whether they're doing the right type of reporting. But when they give you a fact, we kind of say, okay, by and large, that's true. His people see him as that news provider. They believe NPR, New York Times, Norm Ornstein, David Corn, Deep State Radio, whatever, are out there doing something else. We're not reporting. We're political partisans trying to, part of a conspiracy to kill him, one way politically that is. Well, some believe it actually literally, and but that what Donald Trump says is the God's truth, and so they look. So when he reports, it's like imagine like he just does a news report each day. Today I'm reporting from Springfield, Ohio, where they're eating cats and dogs. They see that the way that you would see a straight news report on NBC News, and he knows that. And so he throws that stuff out. Fox comes along and they, reaffirm and amplify what he's doing. And it's a closed information loop. And you'll never get past that. But we do see, that part of the population, I think, is lost, 25, 30%, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But we have seen in the last few months, it's interesting that the cruelty of the mass deportation crusade. What, you're going after Carol, who works at my diner, or Juan, who plays on the soccer team at high school with my son, is starting to get people upset. We see that the big, bad, ugly, horrific, terrible bill has low ratings when people finally hear what it does for Medicaid and gigantic tax cuts for the wealthy. The war, or the idea of going to war with Iran, was not popular. Now, Hegseth and others are really trying hard to get people to rally around the military. And that if you, raise questions, this is a very interesting thing. You haven't seen this so much in the past. That if you raise questions about the value of the attack, the impact of the attack, the result, the legal justification, the constitutionality of the attack, if you do any of that, you're demeaning the brave pilots and others who engaged in this, and that you're devastating them. They're home crying because you are raising questions, and so it's this glorification of the warrior, which thank you for your service. You guys do what you're told to do. You seem to have done the right job, if we can believe what Hegseth says about the competency of the crews that ran the mission. But that is totally separate from the debate and the discussion over whether it was the right thing to do and whether it will have the right results. But yet here they are out there, and this is so he's acting more like a minister of propaganda than a defense secretary. I think that's also quite dangerous. Seems very Orwellian. But so they're trying really hard to shape reality, and they tried to with mass deportations by focusing just on criminals and saying everybody with a tattoo was MS-13. But on some fronts, people can see or feel reality. They see what happens when a grandmother is deported. They see, at one point, you said Trump said the price of eggs fell 90%. At one point, he said they were down 400%, which would mean if you went to the grocery store and bought some eggs, they'd have to give you the eggs and $16.
Yeah.
I mean, negative. But people are seeing that toy prices. 90%, I think. No, I think it's only 75% of all toys sold in America are made in China. Toy prices are going up. It's not even Christmas time, but we're heading into the summer months.
School
Where
supplies as we head to
school
the school
supplies
season.
are coming in August or July now, and toys for summer vacations. So reality hits the road at some point. We've seen in the past in America that with war, there's often an advantage to the commander in chief to rally people and tell his story. They're really going overboard here, attacking reporters for scum, and what I just said about demeaning the troops. And we'll see what happens. I mean, the war, the conflict in the Middle East is not over. Peace hasn't arrived. They'll keep trying to sell it, and other people will keep looking more critically at what's happening on the ground. And one thing you haven't heard about in the last couple of weeks with the war between Israel and Iran, and now the American attack on Iran, you ever heard much about the Palestinians? Gaza. That has not gone away. And when they negotiated the Abraham Accords, and they claimed we'll have peace in the Middle East now. This is it. We've done it. Jared Kushner, give him a Nobel Prize. Well, what was left out of that whole equation, these deals between Israel and some of the Gulf states, not Saudi Arabia, was the Palestinians. And when they signed those deals, the Palestinians in Gaza, West Bank, held demonstrations denouncing these accords because they cut them out. And that, I'm not justifying what Hamas did, the horrific, war crimes it committed, but it was partly, from their point of view, motivated by the Abraham Accords that did not address the Palestinian issue. So in the Middle East, we're never done. We thought we were done in 1953 when we overthrew the democratically elected prime minister of Iran, Mossadegh, because he wasn't giving, because he thought that the oil companies were ripping off his state, which they were, the Western oil companies. And we said, okay, good, we have the Shah there, all well and done. CIA did that, British intelligence did that. Good job, boys. Move on to the next one. Well, it took 26 years, but that's what gave us the Iranian Revolution of 1979, and this fundamentalist terrorist state destroyed Jimmy Carter's presidency and got us to where we are today. So this one attack, this one raid, even if it set Iran back a while, may have other consequences that are unforeseen at this moment.
Well, I will say one of the side effects of what happened on October 7th and in the aftermath of Gaza is that Israel pretty much destroyed the capability of Hezbollah, which was a direct and huge threat to them. They have devastated Hamas, and not because of any of this, the demise of Assad in Syria took away another huge asset for the Iranians, in part because they were able to ship all of these devastating missiles to Hezbollah through Syria.
Mhm.
So Iran was seriously weakened before all of this took place, and they're weakened even more now. Having said that, there are a few things we don't know, but we can be fairly sure have some truth to them. They have 900 pounds of enriched uranium. We don't know where it is, and it appears the Israelis don't know quite where it is. But what we also know is you can't take enriched uranium out through bombing without risking enormous radiation effects that could spread to a large area and kill large numbers of innocent civilians. We know that they probably have the capability in a very short period of time to build what's called a dirty bomb that can still cause devastating damage. And that probably what these attacks have done is not to say to Iran and its leaders, whichever ones remain, oops, we better get out of the nuclear business. It is, if we don't build a nuclear bomb, we are completely vulnerable to what all of these enemies of ours will want to do to us, including bombing us into the Stone Age or trying to overthrow the regime. And if we have an atomic bomb, there is a deterrent there. And we know that even if Israel took out most of its top scientists, that the North Koreans and the Russians are very happy to replace them. So, whether this has devastated much of their nuclear program, and they're not dumb, they moved a lot of stuff out before they
Yeah.
thought there might be these kinds of attacks. Even if the Israelis were able, with a lot of help from inside Iran, to pinpoint where the scientists, the top military leaders were, and assassinate them one by one, or sometimes in groups. Uh, the idea that the Iranian threat has disappeared is simply nonsense at this
The
point.
interesting thing too is, yeah, the destruction of Hezbollah, Hamas, other proxies, it seems to have weakened Iran. The bombing campaign that the Israelis waged weakened their air defenses and allowed for this attack. Uh, and you think that you get them into a weakened state, and what Trump claimed to have been aiming at seems to have been the right thing. Now they're kind of weaker. Let's see if we can revive this deal that was be like the Obama deal that once Trump ripped it up in his first presidency, they then led to a tremendous amassing of centrifuges and a much accelerated development of their nuclear program. So let's go back to where we were under the Obama agreement,
Yeah,
and it seemed like they had a good shot at doing that. Because also the other thing is, I mean, there's a lot of Americans, and I count myself in this group. We don't know a lot about the internal dynamics of other countries. We
yeah,
think some of us think we do. I do know that in Iran, because I mean, I'm looking at this a couple of years ago, there is tremendous pride across the board politically in its nuclear program. They also use it. It's a civilian program. It's for nuclear energy, and they so it's something that even people who don't like the regime support. So this could, lead to people rallying around the regime. It could also strengthen the position of hardliners in the regime. I mean, there are a lot of ripple effects from an action like this that you can't foresee. It's hard to calculate which way they're going to go, and and it seemed that once Israel kind of had done what it did with the attacks, that there was a path forward. You could have tried it for a few months. There was no reason, intelligence seems to indicate, why the attack had to be this weekend. So you could have tried this, but Trump, watching Fox News, listening to whoever the last person he talked to, decided to join in and get the glory of these
Of course,
victories over Iran.
what
We just don't know. I mean, we just don't know how this is going to pan out.
what we also do know now is that the United States is intricately or inextricably linked to this military action. And we have a ceasefire. It's hard to imagine that ceasefire is going to last for any length of time. If the Israelis are able to discover where, for example, remaining centrifuges are, what other nuclear sites there are that are continuing to work. And David Ignatius of the Washington Post, who has very good sources in Israel and in other parts of the world, pointed out 3 additional sites, a couple of which were not bombed, where there's probably nuclear stuff secreted. The Israelis are not going to hold to a ceasefire if they think they can make another strike. And if that happens, we know there are sleeper cells all over the world from the Iranians who can do terrorist attacks.
Yeah,
And let's keep in mind that our National Director of Counterterrorism at the Department of Homeland Security,
I know where you're going.
yeah, a 22-year-old whose previous experience was an assistant to a gardener at a landscaping company. So the idea that we are prepared in case this escalates is a little fanciful.
Well, but also, we have, Tulsi Gabbard, DNI, but also Joe Kent is running the Counterterrorism Center, which is part of uh, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, and this guy is, pretty far right extremist who believes that January 6th was a complete false flag operation mounted by the FBI to discredit Trump folks. And he's supposed to work with the FBI on counterterrorism efforts. I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. Seb Gorka, another right wing extremist, is working at the National Security Council on counterterrorism. It's just not a strong team. Yes, if if Iran chooses to go down that path, it's hard to feel confident